There is a lush rainforest that is now covered in miles of ice on the Antarctic continent. Yeah, that's probably true. In a recently posted podcast, Graham Hancock, the unorthodox explorer of ancient history, gave some shocking new information about the potential past of Antarctica and the builders of the Great Pyramid in Giza. Was Antarctica once a green, lush jungle? What caused its freezing? How is it possibly related to Atlantis? And what secrets did the builders of the Great Pyramids know about the past? We'll find out in the new episode of Hidden Origins. Welcome! For those of you who don't know who Graham Hancock is, he's a best-selling author, journalist, and unconventional thinker who has dedicated his career to challenging traditional historical narratives. He delves into ancient civilizations, exploring hidden connections and lost knowledge, and boldly questions established archaeological theories. Hancock is known for books like Fingerprints of the Gods and Magicians of the Gods. When we talk about Antarctica, there always comes the question whether it was always frozen and whether there was once a time when life flourished and it was all green. There are many fascinating accounts of people who have ventured there, and one of them describes Antarctica quite differently than we're used to imagine. For example, it points that the mountains there were strangely pointy and four-sided, making them look eerily unique, as if like pyramids. Contrary to his preconceived notion, formed perhaps from maps and images of penguins, that the landscape would be fairly flat, he found it to be much more mountainous. This can also be seen in the Orontius Phineus is an international agreement among countries they lay claim to parts of Antarctica. Under this pact, they've all vowed not to excavate or extract minerals from the region. Some even suggest that breaking this pact could be a catalyst for World War III. A catalyst for World War III. Apparently, there appears to be something significant being protected or preserved possibly beneath the continent's thickest layers of ice, which reach up to 3 miles in depth. Additionally, there are numerous research articles that state that around 90 million years ago, the now ice-covered Antarctic continent was home to a lush rainforest. Graham Hancock also discusses this idea. Here's what he says. If you go back that far, you would find that the Earth's climate was very different from how it is today. There's undoubtedly a time when Antarctica was lush and green. But the question is, was it actually lush and green during the lifetime of the human species? Our lineage descends from a line that goes back about 6 million years, not much further than that if we accept conventional evolutionary theory. So 6 million years ago, Antarctica is supposed to have been as cold and frozen as it is today. Graham Hancock shares that when he was writing his first book, Fingerprints of the Gods, in 1995, which is tracing the possibility of a lost civilization, he was very interested in Antarctica because of the work of a previous researcher called Charles Hapgood. Charles Hapgood wrote a number of very important books, one of them called Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, which precisely goes into this issue of ancient maps that don't fit our understanding of how the world was supposed to be known at that time. He proposed a phenomenon that he called Earth crust displacement, whereby from time to time the entire outer crust on the Earth's climate, sea levels, and ecosystems. It might explain some geological phenomena and even be linked to historical events or legends. It is then possible that initially Antarctica could have been in warmer latitudes, and could phenomena even be linked to historical events or legends. It is impossible that initially Antarctica could have been in warmer latitudes and could have then shifted into colder latitudes, but Hancock points to another theory related to the changes in the climate which is much more probable to have happened. It is called the Younger Dryas Impact, a hypothesis that involves comets, meltwater, megaflood, global cataclysm, and the end of the Ice Age. The Younger Dryas Impact hypothesis suggests that a comet or meteorite impact, or possibly multiple, occurred around 1 to 0.00800 years ago, leading to a sudden and drastic climate change. This period was a return to glacial conditions. After the Earth had been warming, this cooling period lasted for about 1,200 years and interrupted a time of climate warming at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. Graham Hancock explains that the end of the Younger Dryas here were two moments. The beginning is 12,800 years ago, a very strange moment in Earth history. And then 12,800 years ago, two things happened at once. First, a sudden cataclysmic drop in climate. The cold, it gets incredibly cold. As cold as it was at the peak of the Ice Age more than 20,000 years ago. It gets incredibly cold, as cold as it was at the peak of the Ice Age more than 20,000 years ago. It gets incredibly cold, but then puzzlingly there's a release of water into the world ocean. So according to the theory, around 12,800 years ago a series of comet fragments struck the North American and European ice caps, causing a significant and puzzling phenomenon. The heat and shock of the impacts released freezing water into the world's oceans, cutting off the Gulf Stream, the planet's central heating system. This caused the Earth's temperature to plummet rapidly. Simultaneously, the additional water in the oceans set the stage for a subsequent rise in temperature. During this cold window, approximately 1,200 years, many of the great Ice Age megafauna such as saber-toothed tigers, woolly mammoths, mastodons, and giant sloths went extinct. Then, 11,600 years ago, the Earth experienced a dramatic warming with a 10-degree rise in global temperatures occurring in just a couple of hundred years. Some attribute this rapid change to a burst of solar activity melting the ice sheets, while others argue that further comet fragments impacts, particularly in the world's oceans, send water vapor into the atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect responsible for the rapid warming. So two comets, one that cools things down and one that heats things up. So what's happening to humanity in this window during these cataclysmic events remains an enigma. Weirdly enough, 11,600 years ago is the date that Plato's Timaeus and Critias give for the downfall of Atlantis. The story of Atlantis reaches us from Plato, who around 300 BC wrote the legend in two dialogues to Timaeus and Critias. Plato's account was not from his imagination, but rather a family story. It can be traced back to the Greek lawmaker Solon, an ancestor of Plato, who made a notable trip to Egypt in 600 BC. In Egypt, Solon visited the Temple of Neith at Sais in the Delta, where he found intriguing inscriptions on the walls. Though the temple is now in ruins, the writing revealed a story of a great civilization destroyed by an enormous flood. Solon referred to this civilization as Atlantis, a name that doesn't have roots in ancient Egyptian but rather seemed to translate a phrase that likely meant the homeland of the primeval ones. Solon was curious about when this tragedy occurred, and the priest said that it happened 9,000 years ago. By connecting the timelines, we get the date of 9,600 BC or 11,600 years ago. Interestingly, this date coincides with other historical events such as the construction of Göbekli Tepe and a period known as Meltwater Pulse 1b when there was a significant increase in world ocean levels. This same timeline is further echoed in the Temple of Horus at Edfu in Upper Egypt, a relatively recent structure built around 270 BC by the Ptolemaic dynasty of ancient Egypt. The walls of the Temple of Horus hold a significant inscription written not in the language of the time but in Middle Egyptian dating back to about 2000 BC. This text reveals that the temple was built upon the foundations of an even older temple, and it draws upon preserved archives from even more ancient times. The inscriptions tell a story that resonates with the Atlantis legend, but in a different context. They speak of a sacred island referred to as the homeland of the primeval ones. According to Graham Hancock, the texts describe a great serpent that comes from the sky, splitting the island in two, followed by a massive flood that destroys nearly all the divine inhabitants. Only a few survivors escape, journeying to places like Egypt, where they erect mounds that would later become the sites of temples and pyramids. These Edfu texts refer to the destruction of the homeland of the primeval ones as happening 7,000 years prior, dating back to 9,000 BC or 11,000 years ago. This aligns perfectly with the date associated with Plato's Atlantis. So what if the serpent that came from the sky as described in the text was actually a comet that struck near the island of Atlantis, causing catastrophic effects? This island, known as the homeland of the primeval ones, after the disaster, their survivors, including 7 sages, traveled the world, striving to rebuild the last civilization. Among their destinations was Egypt, a place where their legacy continues to be heard and felt in the whispers of history and the echoes of ancient texts. The stories about the Great Pyramid of Giza have been an ongoing topic of discussion for years, and numerous theories have been proposed about its construction, purpose, and the technology used by the ancients. From astronomical alignments and mystical powers to its quite doubtful use as a tomb for pharaohs, the questions surrounding the pyramid remain. But in a recent video, Graham Hancock, the renowned explorer, announced some fascinating and little-known details about the ancient megastructure. He suggested that a significant event might have changed the face of the Great Pyramid. Some researchers point to an earthquake in 1301 that led to the loss of its summit, resulting in its current height of approximately 450 to 455 feet, down from its original 481 feet. By analyzing the slope of the pyramid's sides, experts can calculate its original height and determine that as much as 30 feet was lost. Today, the top of the Great Pyramid appears as a stepped platform featuring 2 distinct levels. However, the uncertainty remains. Was the Great Pyramid ever actually completed? In ancient times, it was covered with facing stones, and you can see some of the facing. The ready availability of this high-quality stone made it an attractive resource for builders, leading to the removal of numerous facing stones and the destruction of its facade. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are 4 very narrow shafts which point up at the sky. 2 of them point north and south from the so-called King's Chamber, a room with no discovered burial but containing a sarcophagus too large to have been transported through the corridors. The Queen's Chamber shafts are more complex and enigmatic. He was a Freemason called John Wayman Dixon, and he went around knocking on the walls, and he found 2 hollow points and he broke those through. You could do that in 1872. They opened up into these 2 shafts which go horizontally at first and then point up at the sky. What makes these shafts particularly fascinating is their alignment with the 4 significant stars during the period believed to be the construction era of the Great Pyramid. Archaeoastronomy, a universal and telling language, reveals that one shaft aligns with the lowest star of Orion's belt, a constellation associated with the god Osiris. This alignment is meaningful given the celestial imagery linking Osiris to Orion. Other shafts align with specific northern stars during the time the pyramids were built. The ground pattern at Giza, with its resemblance to the stars and its relationship to the Nile River and the Milky Way, matches perfectly with the sky around 12,000 years ago. This correlation persists from approximately 1,000 years before gradually shifting due to Earth's slow movement. According to Hancock, this raises a contradiction. While the alignment of the pyramids with the ground suggests a date of 12,500 years ago, the alignment of the shafts within the Great Pyramid corresponds to a date 4,500 years ago. This inconsistency could imply that the shafts were carved at a different time or perhaps offer clues to a more complex history. I think the site was sacred more than 12,000 years ago. I think ground platforms were created there. It's important to remember the Great Pyramid is already built around a natural hill. It's worth noting that the Great Pyramid is constructed around a natural hill with the first 30 feet consisting of natural mount, a significant feature in ancient Egyptian traditions regarding the primeval mount. The Great Pyramid's acoustics have also stirred curiosity and intrigued, prompting experimentation. One such trial involved an optical opera singer performing within the King's Chamber, whose voice astonishingly reached even the subterranean chamber. This phenomenon supports the notion that the original sacred site was located there, with ground platforms strategically placed. So the ancient Egyptians completed the construction, brilliantly immortalizing a place of immense importance to them. The use of the pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza, has been another subject of intense speculation and debate. The daily ritual use of the pyramids remains a mystery, and no concrete evidence supports any one specific theory. To get inside the Great Pyramid. This is 400 years before the earthquake. The facing stones are still in place. He could not find the true entrance to the Great Pyramid. So, he knew that the other pyramids, like the Pyramid of Unas, had their entrance in the north face. Unable to locate this entrance, he resorted to hacking away at the north face of the pyramid, an effort that led to what is now known as Mamon's Hole. The story goes on to describe that during the process of breaking through the north face, a falling block was heard within a hollow space, indicating a passageway or chamber. After passing through Mamon's Hole and turning a corner carved out of the rock, you begin to ascend a corridor that leads to the Grand Gallery. This gallery is a majestic structure and an impressive feature of the site. Researchers found the original entrance to the Great Pyramid this way. Although the true original entrance is now open, it is not utilized by tourists visiting the pyramid. We bow before you and thank you for watching another episode of Hidden Origins. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again.